definitions, especially a four-part sorting theory that he introduces early in the book, but barely actually uses himself. This is the theory that has inspired all of those memes, and it goes like this. There are four successive phases of a simulation. In the first, it is a reflection of a profound reality. In the second, it masks and denatures a profound reality. In the third, it masks the absence of a profound reality. And in the fourth, it has no relation to any reality whatsoever. It is its own pure simulacrum. Or, in other words, the objects that define our culture generally go from being representational, mostly accurate reflections of reality, to things that are abstract and meaningless. Baudrillard was very fond of using the term hyperreal to refer to things in the final phase of abstraction, with hyper in this sense meaning beyond. So like something that has gone far beyond reality, beyond the point of having meaning. I was reading a review of the movie 1 Hour Photo the other day, which is a creepy film from the early 2000s, starring Robin Williams as a photo development guy. And the reviewer was describing the hyper-real nature of the store where he worked, which is this sort of Walmart-like place with bright fluorescent lighting and sterile white surfaces. It's a good use of the term because the store doesn't attempt to represent any sort of traditional notion of what a store is supposed to be like, in the way that some faux-authentic general store, like Trader Joe's, might. Walmart-style stores don't represent or mean or evoke anything beyond themselves and the modern consumerist world they're a part of. The racist Moonman memes that Emp Lemon talks about would be another very hyper-real sort of thing. This is a bizarre creation of the internet age, divorced from all of its previous cultural associations and thus consciously divorced from decades or even centuries of meaning. Destruction of meaning was what Baudrillard saw as the great theme of the contemporary world, and he put a lot of the blame on forces like capitalism and technology and the mass media for thriving by pushing fundamentally empty, artificial products and images on the public. Now, it was never super clear exactly how Baudrillard intended his whole theory of the four phases of simulations to be used, because, as I say, he doesn't really do much with it in the book or apply it to real-world things. But it remains a very intriguing system, nonetheless, because it does seem to gesture at something most of us instinctively perceive, which is that cultural objects do seem to get more stylized and artificial and less representational of anything tangible as time goes on. Hyper-real is a process as much as an endpoint. So it's perhaps not surprising that some of Baudrillard's more casual fans have really glommed onto the format as a practical tool of casual cultural analysis. The way people usually play with Baudrillard's four phases these days is by starting with something objectively real and then watching how contemporary culture has slowly drained it of meaning. Take a peach, for example. For a phase 1 simulation, a simulation which still reflects reality, we could use as our example canned peaches at the supermarket, a chopped up version of the real fruit itself. For the second phase, the phase that masks and denatures reality, we could put one of those peach pies that they sometimes sell at McDonald's. Even though it is still nominally made of peaches, they are so processed and full of artificial ingredients that the reality is now heavily concealed. In the third phase, the phase that masks an absence of reality, we could have fuzzy peach candies. They are not made of peaches and they don't really taste like peaches, but they still try to market themselves as being a peach foodstuff. And for the final hyper-real phase, we could have this peach lip balm, a completely inedible product made with no peaches. Its only real connection to peaches is as a category of consumer good, a hyper-real flavor. Okay, now let us try to apply this system to something a bit more immaterial, like love, which, truth be told, is probably a bit closer to the sort of thing that Baudrillard's philosophy was concerned with. So a truly representational symbol of love could be some candid picture of me and my wife in a moment of real-world affection. Second phase could be me and the wife going to some sort of all-inclusive couples retreat, which, while still having the potential for genuine romance, is also a lot more contrived and structured. Third would be me and the wife watching some pornography together, conspicuously using the on-screen intimacy of actors to mask that which is lacking in our actual relationship. Fourth would be me giving her latest Facebook status update a heart emoji, a completely digital, abstract representation of my affection that basically has no analogy to anything in the real world. It is a pure, hyper-real simulacrum of love. That was a somewhat bleak example, but you could apply this to more frivolous things as well. A lot of the fictional characters that dominate our culture these days are basically hyper-real celebrities, in the sense that they are completely fictitious people that we nevertheless spend a lot of time obsessing over. I like this meme about Homer that gives him the 4-phase treatment. Homer begins as a nominal depiction of an American dad. He then becomes a parody of the sort of American dads that we usually see on TV. So we're getting more meta. In the third phase, they abandon making him a parody of anything in particular, and then he eventually just becomes a hyper-real creation existing entirely on his own terms, a popular cartoon character who we all just know as a famous fake person. Does this mean that all movies and TV shows are hyper-real? Baudrillard seemed to think so. Video games would be a good example too, since these days video games are mostly disinterested in having any connection to games of the real world, and instead exist as an alternative to games we might have played in an earlier age. But again, we don't have to think of this just in terms of the material realm. You could say that politics these days is often hyper-real. In America, a lot of politics is described as being part of a culture war, which is the sort of abstract term that would have really delighted Monsieur Baudrillard. So, for example, I recently saw some Republican politicians getting offended on social media over the fact that a transgender woman won some award in competitive swimming. A politician tweeting about something like this would be close to a 4th phase simulacra of politics. It is an action that no previous generation of politician would have recognized as a political act, but it's very common today because our fundamental understanding of what politicians should do has become so heavily bound up in abstract digital performances that are like multiple degrees removed from, passing laws or serving constituents or whatever. Okay, so why does all of this stuff matter? What value is there in learning to think about the world this way? Well, Baudrillard himself, I think, was fairly hostile in his motivation. He didn't like modern society and wasn't shy about saying so. There is a quote near the end of the book where he declares that in regards to today's system, he considers himself a terrorist and nihilist in theory, as the others are with their weapons. So from that perspective, this whole theory of the simulations and simulacra and the hyperreal is a good technique for regarding our contemporary world as something deeply repulsive and alienating, a place that has abandoned reality and authenticity and purpose and embraced meaningless artificial nonsense in its place. And that's perfectly fine on some level, because certainly everyone can find elements of the modern world that are offensive or obnoxious in their phoniness and emptiness, whether it's unhealthy, overprocessed food, idiotic entertainment, make-believe political conflicts, or online stupidity. But on the other hand, when you look at things from a slightly more conservative disposition, where you don't necessarily begin from a premise that advanced forms of capitalism and technology have rendered our modern world disgustingly oppressive and dystopian, it becomes possible to see the creation of simulations and abstractions as cultural developments that don't necessarily displace reality as much as add to the richness and complexity of it. This is the flaw in thinking of the rise of simulacra as strictly a matter of successive phases, as Baudrillard put it. While cultural objects and concepts obviously evolve, it would be a mistake to act as if artificial things invariably displace the authentic, as opposed to coexisting with them or even supplementing them. In other words, while we wouldn't want to live in a world where the only thing to drink was Dr. Pepper, our world is made richer by having Dr. Pepper as an option. Rather than simply signaling our embrace of the phony, the existence of a hyperreal drink like Dr. Pepper can also be seen to reflect our society's technical talents and creativity, and our capacity to continuously broaden our cultural imagination of what a drink can be, without necessarily eliminating the old. This video is brought to you by Dr. Pepper. No, I'm just kidding. A politician engaged in a hyper-stylized, hyper-real political performance on Twitter, likewise, could be viewed as a meaningless virtue signal from one perspective, but it could also be seen as a net positive for politics overall if such preening nevertheless grants us a new and valuable window into that politician's values and priorities. In short, things don't necessarily have to lose meaning as they get